Few things in Fallout match the thrill of discovery and the satisfaction that comes with it. The riches of the wasteland remain for those willing to dig a little deeper. And in the ash heap, where mining opportunities are everywhere, there's one unmarked location that stands above the rest. Golden Quarry Pond. This quarry lives up to the promise of its name and is a hotspot for gold ore. But there's something else about it that makes it truly special. I first noticed it was unique when I saw this dense streak of ore clusters on this ore vein map. I had camped at this location previously and was familiar with the spot, but what had gone overlooked was this buried truck beneath the peak of the quarry. It's as if this truck once spilled its cargo down into the quarry, which resulted in this location containing one of every regular ore vein type, including ore that smelts into rare junk such as black titanium, crystal, gold, nuclear material, and silver. It's a subtle and ironic environmental detail that stays true to the lore of the nearby AMS testing site, where the push to mine the rarest of ore, Ultrasite, was unsuccessful. If the offerings of this quarry aren't enough, which includes convenient pickings of ash rose and blight, there are also 3 clusters of copper ore between the pond and the testing site. Although they are within reach, a random encounter travels between 2 of these copper spots, including a wandering Grafton monster that drifts fairly close to the quarry. But from up here, even more looting opportunities come into view. To the east lies Hornwright Air Purifier Site number 3, home to 2 towering machines known as ash forges. While their true purpose was hidden from the public, discoveries made by data miners form a clearer picture. A cut quest called Old Flames suggests an ash forge was once intended to be a resource collector that extracts minerals straight from the air. Even though these never functioned, this location contains a modest amount of scrap, including oil and antiseptic. Inside is a Wakemaster alarm clock, a rare classified junk item that breaks down into nuclear material. Just beyond this location is the spawn zone, where players can manually trigger the event BattleBot. It's a quick and efficient stop for completing event challenges, and fittingly, you'll need to move fast to keep up with the objective. While the event itself offers standard rewards, the most loot lies in the room with the master switch, where you'll find a valuable mix of adhesive, oil, and a little circuitry. Don't forget to check the roof, which has even more sources of oil. The looting opportunities continue to the north, because across the road from the quarry are 2 train cars loaded with loot. The findings here are only a small part of what Mount Blair Train Yard has to offer, including the only spawn of looseberry mentats in the exterior world. Down the street are the remains of a Welch miner's Blockade. This old protest site is more than just environmental storytelling, for the patriotic souls that once stood their ground here were on top of a rich cluster of ore, including copper and aluminum. On this same road is a house often patrolled by an assault-type random encounter, making the loot inside tough to retrieve. Given that this is the home of the fiancé of Vault 76's Overseer, an Overseer's holotape is within, as well as some junk items that could contribute towards a few daily challenges. The coal ore cluster by the exposed pipe along the road is the densest in the game. A few more discoveries await on the cliffs north of Welch Station. Up the hill on the left is one of the densest, rich, black titanium ore clusters that can be mined. But what's even more valuable, the adorable cat who lives at this coffee shack. If you would ever like an additional companion for your camp, Murgle is here for you, and the loot at this shack is pretty good too. Back towards Welch, a teddy bear scribe can be found nestled in the cliffside. It's the first of 4 teddy bears in the Welch area. The second waits inside a destroyed home further south, though you may need to dislodge it with a weapon to retrieve it. Perhaps no town in Appalachia was hit harder by mining automation than Welch. Most players return to this area to complete mole miner challenges, but it actually has more to offer than most think. Miner corpses, strikebreaker robots, and protest signs have littered the streets since 3 weeks before the bombs fell. These were the last words of those who stood against progress they never asked for. The protest signs are surprisingly useful for various repair challenges. Unlike most weapons, they always start at 100% condition, regardless of your luck stat, making them a reliable option for quick challenge completion. To maximize their use, gather as many as you can find. Hit a mole miner once, then switch to the next sign and repeat. Repair them all using just a single piece of wood per sign. A weapons bench is at the center of Welch, making it even more convenient. Mole miners often drop mole miner filters, an excellent source for black titanium. But for players who like a good treasure hunt, over 24 rich black titanium veins are hidden throughout Welch. There's a path marked by ash rose that runs along the train station wall to start things off. The area contains a bit of almost every ore type as well, including one particularly rich cluster of silver veins that can be found right beside the site of the Enclave event, a real blast. Contributing to the sinking feeling of Welch are a handful of mole rats on the western side of town near the main spawn point. Descending this path of ash rose, which leads to sources of this town's destruction, may alert 2 static spawns nearby. Down below, near the Ultrasite pillars, are 2 additional mole rat variants known as Ultramites. If you're in need of additional mole rats for challenges, 2 more can be found on the train tracks above by the station, though there are plenty of reliable spawns found throughout Appalachia. From the lowest points of Welch, you'll find an abandoned stash of chems inside this locked safe. Part of a drug dealer turned bartender's past life, the chems here remain a reliable source, though some may be glad to know past mistakes can be buried both literally and figuratively. Finding our way to the neighboring destroyed house, some notable outliers of challenge loot can be found. It's here that I'd like to offer a challenge of my own, one that I hope leads you to some Fallout fun you never knew was there. Instead of crafting and scrapping to complete this challenge, why not consider completing it in a more interesting way? For example, there are 8 pipe weapons that reliably spawn in Welch. How many of them can you find? Hidden among the ruins of Welch is a house that once belonged to Ray Gary, a cryptid hunter and friend of the fan-favorite character Calvin Van Lowe. He lived in Welch with his wife, Laura, whose absence weighed on him in his final days. She had left to scavenge for supplies, a responsibility she took on due to Ray's condition after a devastating encounter with the sheep squatch. Near Ray's body, a pair of binoculars remain, as if he spent his last days watching, waiting for a sign that she might come back. Sadly, she never returned. An unpickable Tesla Science magazine rests on the shelf beside his desk, one of just 2 unpickable magazines in the game. Was Gary researching ways to prolong life, perhaps even hoping to find a way to bring peace to his friend Calvin Van Lowe? Or was he simply finding solace in conspiratorial knowledge, grasping onto the strange and bizarre in a world that was undoubtedly about to become even more strange and bizarre? Maybe the idea brought him comfort as he approached the face of death. Ray Gary's story is one of quiet endurance and of holding on to hope, even when there wasn't much reason to. Perhaps that's why it's so fitting that behind his home lies a crashed vessel tied to the quest Hope Remains. This wreckage will appear after progressing through the quest given by the ally character, Sophia de Guerre. After it arrives, it becomes freely available and will always be here. It respawns its loot just as any regular container would and includes an exceptional payout of junk, including aluminum, circuitry, and other high-value tech scrap. It's relieving to know that in Appalachia, even in the town that lost everything, hope refuses to be extinguished. And now it's time we leave Welch behind for the loot that lies to the south. This area opens up into a landscape rich with ore veins, more concentrated here than anywhere else in the game. It's also home to the alluring ash rose and an abundance of blight, making it a prime location to gather these ingredients. Some of the best finds surround the entrance to abandoned Mineshaft 1, but with radiation still seeping from its depths, caution is essential. Be especially careful when picking the ash rose near the rock wall lined with aluminum veins. These veins, combined with the small cluster on the opposite side of the mine, make this spot one of the best locations for aluminum ore mining. Even with the abundance of ore, I imagine most players will find this area most useful for the 10 blight growing right next to the spawn point. For even more, follow the road toward the AMS testing site, then veer north toward a small pond, where additional blight can be found. Personally, my enjoyment of blight farming depends entirely on the time of day. The blight can be continuously picked as we travel down the road to another cluster of ore, this one being lead. Another cluster of copper ore is spread out on this mountain of rocky ash, and it's beside even more ore worth considering. This path leads toward yet another motherlode of loot, an unmarked location known as Gnomes Sweet Gnomes Camp. Here, you guessed it, the densest cluster of gnomes in the game, and perhaps the densest cluster of questionable debauchery. Further into this open area lies a unique cultist ash rose shrine, as if it wandered out of the forest region and became lost in the ash heap. A walk through the pool might lead to the rather startling sound of mostly submerged skeletons hitting against each other. Though this is an impressive cultist location, players should mainly consider visiting for the ash rose and loot because the enemy spawn is random. At first glance, this lower section of the map may appear empty, but upon closer inspection, it reveals a finely handcrafted landscape, offering a sense of natural exploration with little paths that lead from one grouping to the next. It's all fine work and underappreciated, I imagine, and I encourage everyone to try out a little ore farming in a place where the search effort matches the yield. By following any of the countless little suggested paths in this area, you'll experience the handcrafted environmental details I have come to appreciate. I found myself feeling extra intrigued by the environmental look of the area. Turns out, there's a reason why this stretch of land feels both beautiful and desolate. And to understand it, let's take a look at this map of the game's region boundaries. Some of the game's most striking scenery is found where biomes overlap, and this is one of the rare locations where three converge, creating this unique hybrid biome. Given how the forest wraps around the map's outer edge, this discovery surprised me. It was something I felt before I truly understood what I was feeling. You'll know for sure you're in one of these areas when the ambient sounds of each region overlap with each other. With our journey to the southernmost part of the ash heap complete, we've reached the end of this episode of Loot Locales. I hope you enjoyed this exploration of what I believe to be some of Bethesda's finest environmental design. If the loot, or promise of a rewarding treasure hunt doesn't lure you in, I hope you'll consider visiting for the atmosphere. While it may be toxic, it does have its own kind of Fallout appeal. Thank you for watching.